Hello hearties, it's Catherine here on one of our sweltering London days. I've just got back from a week in Cornwall and then a week in North Wales, and it's really reminding me just how much hotter it gets here than the rest of the country. And I'm doing this video today because I wanted to talk to you about taking radical action in our lives, in our businesses, when there's something really important to us that we want to achieve. And this has come about because, as you know, I've been promoting Anne Wilson's Financial Freedom University this week and last week. And it's one of the things she talks about within that programme. And so I've been talking about it quite a lot in the free Facebook group that I set up to support people making a decision about joining. And, you know, it's really got me thinking about those times in my life when I have taken radical action because there's been something that has been very important to me. And I think, you know, there are times in our lives when if we are really committed to something, then it makes sense to take this more radical action, which is what Anne calls it, in pursuit of those dreams and goals. And, you know, how easy it is for us to want to stay comfortable in our familiarity zone. We don't want to upset the status quo. We have a natural human resistance, a natural human fear of change very often. But sometimes what most serves us will be to have a really quite big radical change or shake-up, or make a quite big decision that's going to move us forward. So I thought, because I'm thinking about this and I'm talking about it a lot in that group, I would come in here and just for fun share with you 4 situations from both my business life and my financial life over the past few years where I feel I took quite radical action in order to achieve, you know, the vision that I had for my life or my business. And I want to share them with you and share what happened as a result, as a way of triggering you to be thinking, you know, is there something here that I could be doing that is perhaps a little more radical than I'd been considering that's going to really help me to move forward in quite a big way. So the first of these is that I moved to a town that I actually didn't like, I didn't want to live in, and I only knew one other person who lived there, and I did it because I was so committed to getting my business off the ground. This was back in early 2012. I was living in Brighton. I was in the very early stages of setting up this business, Selling from the Heart Limited, and I was working in 2 freelance sales roles as a way to bring in the income. And I got given notice by my landlord to move out of the flat that I was living in. My landlady, she wanted to move back from South Africa and take it back over. And during the time I'd been living there, property prices and rental prices had shot up in Brighton so much. And I knew that it was going to really hurt my business to have even more of an outlay every month. And I had visited, I'd visited this town. I probably shouldn't mention the name of the town because I say, you know, it was a place that I didn't particularly want to move to, but some of you may be living there and very happy. I had a friend who'd recently moved there and I visited, and the first instinct I had was, this is definitely not a place for me. I couldn't understand why he'd moved there, actually. I really just didn't understand it at all. But once I checked out property prices there, I realised that moving there was going to enable me to give up one of those freelance sales roles. And those 2 roles between them were taking up about 5 to 6 hours a day of my time, and it wasn't leaving a lot of leftover time around the edges. So I took this leap and I moved to a completely new town where I only knew one person, and I actually ended up living there for 2 full years while I grew my business. Now, what happened as a result was I was able to immediately give up the one of those 2 freelance roles that felt the most heavy and energetically draining for me as a result of the new time, but also the new energy that I had. That year, I launched my first online program. I started running my first webinars. I started doing live speaking gigs up in London. And I got my business off. I started working with private clients. I got my business off to a really great start that year. So that was my first radical action. The second radical thing might not sound so radical. This might feel quite commonplace because many of you will have done this yourselves. But I made a decision at the beginning of 2013 to invest in business mentoring. And I invested in a 1-year business mentoring program for £5,000 plus VAT, so that's £6,000 in total because I wasn't VAT registered at the time. And the reason that was so radical was because in the previous financial year, my actual business, so this business, despite the fact that I'd finally got it off the ground, I'd launched my online program, I was running webinars, it brought in a total revenue of about £6,500 to £7,000 in 2012, and I invested £6,000 in a 1-year mentoring program with somebody that I barely knew. I think I'd got onto his mailing list about 2 weeks prior to that, didn't know a great deal about him, but his sales emails and the telephone call I had with him, it just instinctively felt like the right thing to do. I probably, in hindsight, if I was being wise, I would have done a bit more research, but I took a leap of faith, radical action. I joined, and what actually happened was that in 2013, my business turnover went from just under 7,000 in 2012 to 118,000 in 2013, that year that I worked with this particular business mentor. Now, a lot of people hear that and they think that sounds amazing. I have to say I don't recommend it. I don't recommend growth of that speed with this type of business. It was actually quite painful and took quite a lot of years to sort of really get everything streamlined. So for various reasons, I don't recommend that speed of growth, but it was still an amazing year for me. The third radical action that I've taken that stands out for me happened at the end of 2016. So by the end of 2016, I had been running a 12-month business mentoring program, and I've been running it for several years. I usually had about 20 people in that program, and I charged between £5,000 and £10,000 for the year, depending on the level and depending on the payment plan. And it was a really good business model for me. I had one of those rinse and repeat business models where I knew that if I took certain action every year, I would get certain end results, and those end results resulted in a consistent business turnover of about 150,000 a year. And it was pretty repeatable and pretty predictable. And it was amazing on paper. You know, it was beyond my wildest dreams. But there was something about it that just wasn't quite right. And it took me a long, long time to put my finger on it. But something just felt heavy around it. And I had this sense that there was something else for me, that there was something bigger and even more exciting where I could have an even bigger impact. And I didn't really know what that was, but I just knew that as long as I continued to run that program, which took up a huge amount of my time and energy and attention, I wasn't going to be able to find out what really was possible for me out there. And at the end of 2016, I made a decision not to offer that program. So I effectively made a decision to wipe off over £100,000 in revenue immediately. Now, I did replace it with some things. I did launch a much lower investment group mentoring program that allowed me to still work with a certain number of clients. But there was a really big financial impact for me of deciding to give that up. Now, what happened as a result? Well, first of all, not a whole lot happened. And it was a little bit hairy in those first few months of 2017 because I was thinking, I know it was the right thing to give this up, but I can't quite feel into what's next. And I even had moments of thinking, what if there isn't a next for me? What if this is it for me in this business and it's sort of run its course and the passion has run its course? And it wasn't until the end of March 2017 that I was driving on the South Circular in London. I clearly remember the moment, listening to a podcast, and I had that light bulb aha moment where I instantly knew that for me, it was all about community. It was all about being able to help many, many more people than I was able to help at the time. And for me, that meant a membership community. And from that moment on, everything changed. Now, the fourth really big and radical action that I've taken in support of both my business goals and my financial goals was making a decision in about March, April of 2017 to significantly downsize my living arrangements. Now, this came about for two reasons. So first of all, Financial Freedom University played a big part, because the first time I did Financial Freedom University at the beginning of 2014, what was apparent that was most important for me was that I needed to learn to enjoy money again. I needed to learn to reward myself for all the hard work I was putting into my business and actually have a lifestyle and enjoy a lifestyle that reflected that. And I made quite a radical decision at that time to move back to London and to do it no compromises. I wanted to move to a really nice area. I wanted to live on my own. I wanted to have 2 bedrooms because I wanted one to be the office. I wanted a garden, no compromises. And I did exactly that. However, when I revisited Financial Freedom University 3 years later, so early 2017, it was clear to me that now, starting to make real inroads into my future financial freedom was a much higher priority. And that in relation to my financial goals, putting out such a large amount in rent every single month, for me as a single person, I'm single, no children, no pets. Did I really need a 2-bedroom house with a garden and a private parking space? And it was clear that in the interests of my financial freedom goals, that sort of expenditure didn't make sense. I also downsized for another reason, and this was because by now I've got crystal clear about this membership community being the future for my business. And I felt that it was important to me that I didn't have a really high set of outgoings that were going to lead me to make decisions in my business based on needing to bring money in, when what I wanted to be doing was focusing on the long term. And so in May 2017, so not much over a year ago, I downsized. I stayed in my local area, but I've moved to a flat that's a lot smaller than the house. Well, clearly it was a house. I've moved to a flat. So, not a massive compromise. I'm not sharing or anything. That would be a step too far for me, but definitely a big downsize in comparison to where I was. And what happened? Well, amazingly, I love this new flat way more than I love the house, for all sorts of reasons, one of which was that the house was at the end of a cul-de-sac. And if you know anything about feng shui, I think there's something about the flow of energy at the end of a cul-de-sac, which can be quite stagnant. But there's something about this new place. It's on the top floor. It's very light and bright with big windows. And I think just the energy of it is beautiful. I'm in London and I often feel like I'm living near the sea. There's no seagulls, but I have that living near the sea feeling. So I love the new place, even though it was a really, really scary decision. And I definitely had a lot of doubts about the move at the time. But I love the new place even more, even though it's, like I said, a significant downsize. But the other thing that happened was that it freed me up, because I didn't have such huge financial outgoings. It freed me up to be able to focus my energy on my membership, on launching and growing that membership community without the distraction of needing to do other big launches to bring in other revenue streams. So as a result of downsizing and being able to make more long-term strategic decisions about my business rather than I need to bring in a lot of money right now to cover my outgoings, what happened was that since I've moved, I've had a complete rebrand, a complete website redesign. I had my biggest launch of the Get More Clients Saying Yes I've ever had last autumn. And then I launched the membership community off the back of that. I worked really hard on creating something that the members loved. I relaunched it again into brand new members just in May. I've now got over 200 members of this community, so we're off to an amazing start. And I now have the sort of financial foundations through the membership revenue to give me the platform from which I can continue to grow and improve it and find better and better ways to serve the members. So each of those things that I've shared was a huge decision. It felt radical at the time. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't what I wanted to do. It felt like too much of a risk. It felt too scary. It felt like it could be a huge mistake. I believe that I might not be happy as a result. And yet every single one of them has taken me towards the long-term vision. And, as a result, a cumulative result of those 4 decisions, I now have a business and a business model that I absolutely love. I'm living in a home that I absolutely love, and I'm well on track to working towards my long-term financial freedom. And each one of those radical decisions had made a significant impact for me in allowing me to do that. So my question for you today is, what are you committed to in your business or in your life or in your financial life, where you can see that taking radical action could be the thing that you need to do to help you move towards where you really want to be, but more quickly than you're moving right now? And for each of you, it will be something completely different. But if you know what that is and you're happy to share, please go ahead and share in the comments below. I read all of them and I absolutely love hearing from you. So I shall wrap up and say goodbye for today. Look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye-bye.